The fourth step in creating a sales message is to brainstorm the questions that either you or your salespeople should be asking as part of this sales message. And to help you with organizing all of the different types of questions that you might want to try to remember to ask, we've actually created 9 categories of different types of questions. And while that might sound like a lot or like a lot of work that you have to do or think about, I want to alleviate that concern right here, because the only category that you really need to answer anything at first is the category of pain questions. These other categories are actually already filled in with standard questions that we've loaded up for you. So at least out of the gate, you can just use those and come back to that later. So what we mean by pain questions is, in the previous step, you should have brainstormed some of the pain points that you can help make go away. Well, one type of question that is extremely productive for you to ask are questions to identify if your prospect has those pain points. And so what we do on this tab here when you're on pain questions is we basically bring over all of the pain points, and those are in blue, that you entered on the previous step, and we give you an answer box, and we lead you with this question here, which is to identify if your target buyer type has this particular pain point you could ask, and then we're just trying to lead you to entering questions in these boxes that help you to identify if someone has those concerns or not. I just want to point out a couple things about these questions pages. First of all, as I mentioned, you have 9 different categories of questions. You can change the name of these categories, and you do that on this field right here, which will be on each of these tabs. So this is pain questions. We could change the name of this, and then that will change this category. And then in the library of documents, anywhere you see this category of questions, that name of the category would change. A quick example, here's funding availability. These are financially related, budget related questions. You could change that category to financial questions, depending on what questions you end up changing and modifying in that category, but that is all customizable. Another thing is that this checkbox here will hide these questions in the qualifier. The qualifier is a feature in our CRM. You can see here prospect qualifier. This prospect qualifier will display these questions. So if you're not using a particular category of questions and you just don't want these to display for your salespeople or for yourself, you can check this, and then that whole category will be hidden. And above each answer box, you have these 2 buttons here. Use one of your past answers, use one of our answers. Use one of your past answers are any answers that you've entered into this page on previous sales messages, and you can repurpose those. Use one of our answers are answers that we've entered in our script library to these particular questions, and you can access any of those. One thing that's unique on the questions page is that here is a question that I've entered in this particular sales message. The prospect is likely to answer with some answer to this question. And what we could do is, based on how the prospect responds, maybe we say something or ask another question. Well, if you want to get that into the script, you can click this add a follow-up question, and this will take you through a little pop-up wizard. You enter what the prospect is likely to say. So if I say the prospect says important, then I can click save. And what that will do is that will enter a follow-up box where I can then enter follow-up question. And then this becomes an outline of like a question branch, a question tree in the script library. So that is really helpful when you are creating a script for salespeople. So if you're creating this for yourself, maybe you don't need all of those follow-up questions. But if you're creating a script for maybe a new sales hire and you need them to know how to respond depending on how the prospect responds to the questions that you give them, you can make it extremely clear by creating these follow-up questions. The last thing is that you can highlight any of these questions. So if you select highlight, that question will then be highlighted in the scripts, so you can make sure your sales reps are drawn to that question. So a reason why you might want to use that is if you create, let's say, 10 different questions, but there's 1 or 2 that are really important, You could highlight it to make sure your sales rep doesn't forget to ask those. You can also hide some of those. So in your brainstorming, maybe you thought of some, but you want to just get them out of the way from the script without deleting them. The hide button will keeps this question in your sales message, but just hides it from your script. You can also drag and drop these questions to change the order. So after you've brainstormed, you might realize that there's a better order for the questions. So that's a little bit of how you sort of administer and manage the information that you enter. Now let me just show you some of these other tabs and give you the brief rundown on what these are. So pain questions, again, those are questions that look for your prospect's pain. Current environment, these are questions that probe for what is the prospect doing in the area that you have something to offer. So for example, if you sold cars, current environment questions would be to try to figure out what is the prospect currently driving, right? So this would be, what are you driving today? What year is it? How many miles does it have? How often do you usually buy cars? And whatnot. So current environment, these are some current environment questions that are loaded up. These are very generic. Likely you would want to modify these so that they fit more with what you're selling. But again, out of the gate, these might be okay for now. Need versus want, these are questions that try to determine, okay, if you're talking to a prospect and they seem interested, is the prospect, is it more of that they want what you sell, or is it more that they truly need what you sell? So these are some generic questions to probe for that. You could modify these. Funding availability, these are designed to figure out how much money does your prospect have to spend. So this should help you get started there, but certainly you can modify those. Decision authority, this is basically, are you talking to the decision maker? Or how much buying power does the person that you're talking to have? Competition level, these are to try to feel out what's the competition landscape like. Is the prospect talking to anyone else? How serious are they in terms of buying from you, or are they just kicking your tires? And these bottom three are just some closing questions. So just very generic closing questions that show up in different places in the scripts, and you could certainly add and edit any of those. So as you can see, all of these tabs are loaded up. When you first come here, it's only the pain questions that will be empty, and that where you need to spend a little time to create some questions. What I would suggest is maybe you work on the pain questions first at a minimum, or if you want to go a little bit further, work on the pain questions and the current environment questions. And then once you get up and running, then come back and maybe further develop and refine these other categories of questions.